So welcome back to the lecture Network Security. This is for first semesters. Before we start, I always have some questions. There are two reasons. First, I want to know what information have reached you. And secondly, I would invite you to kind of repeat what we have done last time, and after that you should be on track and should remember what we discussed last time. We talked about building blocks of network security, and we used a lot of terms. I would like to repeat some of the terms. What is a firewall? Any idea? Yeah.
So it's a device we put it between the outer internet and the internal network.
Okay.
To prevent the harmful connection.
Okay, you are using a lot of, let's say, specific information. First, I would like to generalize between the internet, the outer network, and the inner network, actually between two zones, whatever zones it is. It might be within your company. So that's one generalization. The other thing is to prevent connection. What you mean is to prevent certain traffic to go through. There's not necessarily a connection in the terms of what you have learned about connection-oriented protocols, packet-oriented protocols, connection-less protocols, data stream-oriented protocols, something like that. Right. So a firewall limits certain traffic that can go through and decides on certain criteria what traffic will be accepted and what not. What is a zone? I used that term before. We used it actually in the explanation of the firewall. A zone is a group of networked computers with
it's like maybe it's just one computer, or maybe a group of computers.
Yeah, I'm asking for a definition and you come up with examples. So what is the definition actually?
The definition is like
how would you define a zone?
The zone.
And I started, that's a group of computers which, and then you can use that stub to answer the question, maybe would be try to help. Yes, and yeah.
It's a group of computers which is separated into a private network. So, for example, the outsider user, when he's trying to access a server, it's a general server.
You come again with an example. No problem. But how would you define a zone?
Maybe it's pieces which are network.
Yeah.
Communicate with each other inside of it. So devices in the zone as around can communicate with each other in a direct way.
Okay, let's give it another try. I try to give a definition. I don't have a definition written anywhere. I'm trying to memorize and generate a definition here on the fly.
It's like
a zone is a group of computers which share the same security requirements, or that impose the same threat to other computers, and hence they are put together in a group And now you come with examples. For instance, a zone can be realized by putting firewalls around it. So the firewall limits the traffic, everything in a zone which is accessible to the internet, for instance, is more vulnerable than anything that is behind another firewall in the internal network. That leads to the question, what is a demilitarized zone? Any ideas?
A zone between, for example, the internet access point and databases, which are not supposed to be accessed from the internet directly.
Yeah. So you have to, that's right, you have to offer some services to the internet, to the general public. So there needs to be access to certain parts of your network, your web servers, for instance. And on the other hand, you don't want anyone in the internet to access your database. And the solution is to have two firewalls, at least two firewalls. One between the specific zone we are talking about, the demilitarized zone, and the internet, which only allows traffic to the, in our example, web server. And another firewall that only allows and forbids everything else, the traffic between the web server and the database server for the purpose of generating websites. So that's a demilitarized zone. You need two firewalls, a zone, a specific zone that offers service to the general public, and hence needs to be protected from the internal network where you don't want the general public to access your data. So that's why you build a demilitarized zone. We talked about intrusion detection systems already as a definition. What is an intrusion detection system? A system that monitors traffic and raises an alert if something unusual happens. Perfect definition. Example. An intrusion detection system might detect a denial of service attack by the increased number of requests to a specific website coming from one specific computer or from a specific group of computers, or if you are very unlucky, coming from a variety of different computers. Question, what is a denial of service attack? I'm asking for a definition here. Or kind of definition. I don't want an example. It's when you, yeah, that's not what I want. Yeah. Any ideas? What's a denial of service attack? Okay, yeah, trying to exhaust the resources of a specific device, maybe a server, in order to limit the service that this device is offering, to block it. So the idea is to, this is an example, to send as many packets as you can, as many requests as you can to a web server from different computers. Do we need to own those computers as an attacker? No. We can use a bot network. What is a bot network? A group of computers under control of an attacker, which he does not own. What is a distributed denial of service attack? The denial of service attack is not performed by one single computer, but by a bot network or by a group of computers with the help of a group of computers. So you can increase the throughput, you can increase the request rate. Question, how can you stop a denial of service attack? We talked about that. You you have to answer all the requests. Of course, you cannot distinguish between faithful and bad packets. So you have to increase the resources. You have to have more resources than the attacker. We talked about a lot of other attacks. I would like to know what a brute force attack is. We talked about that when we talked about authentication in general. Brute force attack is an attack where the attacker tries all possibilities to get access. Maybe all the potential keys, maybe all the potential passwords. More general question. What does authentication mean?
You have to prove your identity.
Proving your identity. We mentioned the term two-factor authentication in the last lecture. You are using at least two-factor or multi-factor authentication. You're using at least two factors, two different ways to authenticate yourself. Maybe a password, some knowledge-based system, and some possession-based system. You're getting a text message, an SMS. Yeah, and then you can prove. Last question for the repetition. Why are different attackers, or why pose different attackers a different risk? Because they can have access to more or less resources. What resources would you need to perform an attack? It depends. If you need a bot network, or if you can work with a single computer. If you need a quantum computer to break into a cryptographic system, or you can run it on a Raspberry Pi. Maybe you need knowledge. If the attacker knows how the protocol works, he is more able to perform the attack than if he does not know. Intellectual property, intellectual resources. Stupid attacker, a very intelligent attacker. The motivation of attackers. Some want to self-glorify themselves. Some are working for a terrorist group. Some are working for a government. They have access to different knowledge, different resources. Attackers that are inside the organization, attackers that are outside the organization. I'm always using the model that 1% of people are evil, or 10%. Maybe. Let's hope it's just 1%. So it's none of you, I guess. You're not that many, potentially. Okay. So I think we stopped here. Somewhere here, I guess. It was here. So share that. There's nobody online, but for the record. Or actually, it's better to share the entire screen. This would enable me to use my iPad here later on. Yeah, we talked about intrusion detection system. It can detect certain attacks, anomalies, pattern, some statistics, maybe some data-driven approaches where you look at the specific likelihood of a message to be or to come from an attacker. You could, for instance, take into account the IP address or the country of origin of that packet. We talk about that later. How can we detect that? What reactions can be performed? A proxy is another building block. We have somebody who stands in for the real system, maybe for the entire internal network. In this term, a proxy could play the role of a firewall. Proxy monitors the entire traffic. Maybe it looks for, this is an example, looks for any viruses being downloaded in emails, or the proxy looks for any malware in HTTP downloads. By the way, what is a virus? And now I'm asking for a definition again. How would you define a virus? Any idea?
So it's often come with computer is by some kind of background.
Yeah. And it usually has a distribution mechanism. That would work as a definition. Do you have any examples? We talked about boot sector viruses. Very old-fashioned type of virus. 20 years ago, it was their typical behavior to exchange disks, floppy disks between students to share some games. And they all had a boot sector in it that could be written by malware. If you left it inside the floppy disk drive and you booted your computer accidentally, it would read the boot sector which was infected, which caused the computer to be infected, which then infected all the other disks you put in the computer. Typical way of how viruses propagate.
And maybe it doesn't fit the definition of a virus, but WannaCry.
Yeah, worm, virus, malware. There are so many different ways to infect a computer. So let's stay with that. So the proxy might change the traffic that it is forwarding. On the application layer, ISO layer, so it is able to detect images, for instance. A proxy might be able to prevent images of a naked Santa Claus to get into a country, because the government does not want naked Santa Claus images in their country. They build around a huge firewall, put some proxies in it, and all images that contain a naked Santa Claus, which can be detected, image recognition. I would be interested in the training set. So, but anyway, image detection can be used to filter out those images. Or you could change that. Put some closures on, or a big black bar in front of the parts you don't want to see. Whatever. Proxies have a variety of functions. Filtering out unwanted material is just one of them. They can also be used to
reverse proxy,
monitor traffic. They can be used to hide the internal structure of the network. That's what you mentioned.
Maybe load balance.
Load balance. Maybe they stand in for a server and distribute the traffic to a variety of real servers. Yeah, a load balancer is kind of a proxy. That's right. Okay, we are going to discuss this later. What is a virtual private network? Another building block of network security. Couple of years ago, couple of decades ago, the internet was invited, and the internet is a very cheap way to send data from A to B. But the internet has some disadvantages. There are 1% evil users in it. That includes 1% of network administrators. The government might be interested in what you are transferring, whatever. So as you did before, the internet is an evil place. It's not really, but it can be seen as an evil place in the view of network security. But it's so cheap that we want to use it for our data transfer. So we have to protect our data. What are we doing? We guarantee the integrity. We guarantee the confidentiality. And maybe we guarantee the authenticity of the other side we are talking to. Proving the identity, as we said before. And another reason to build a VPN is to build maybe a shared or a common address space. That was a not security-driven reason to build a VPN. To have two separate networks, to use the same IP address, or not the same layer 3 network on both sides, so you are tunneling the layer 2 network through the internet. That works. Building or using a shared address space, common address space. How can we guarantee integrity of data? We talked about integrity. What is the definition, I use that term, of integrity of data?
Data is not manipulated.
It's not altered, it's not manipulated. That's right. Manipulation sounds like a willful act. Is it always a willful act? It's not. So there are basically two types of alterations. Technical reasons, maybe we have some noise in the traffic, maybe we have misinterpreted a symbol while transferring data. That's a technical reason. Or a willful act, which is a manipulation, because the attacker wants to change the information for its own sake. His or her. So, how can we prevent both of them? Alterations of data, at least we have to recognize that there's an alteration. That would work.
We have package, we could checksum, or use your checksum to check integrity.
The checksum increases the probability of the packet, the data not being altered. It's not a guarantee, by the way. I can generate another packet that has the same CRC checksum frame check sequence as the original one. I know how to calculate. That's very easy. An attacker could do that as well. The attacker could generate a checksum which fits the data, the manipulated data. So a checksum does not help to prevent willful acts of manipulation because the attacker can generate the checksum. We need something else to protect data from intentional manipulations. Digital signature. We are going to discuss the cryptographic basics again as a repetition later on. You're right. The digital signature must be generated in a way that the attacker cannot easily, at least easily, generate the same signature. So it requires a key. Have fun. They're going for lunch without me, actually. They have a good reason because there's a defense later on. So they already excused. Okay, so we need to protect the integrity of data. We can use digital signatures. We can use checksums. For a VPN, a digital signature would be helpful because we want to protect the VPN from willful acts of manipulation as well. How about authenticity? We talked about that over a network. If you use some biometry, doesn't really work because you can manipulate the image you see on a video stream. We discussed that. How about knowledge-based systems that would work? Do you remember challenge response schemes? We don't want to send the password in plain text over the network. So a challenge response scheme can be used to prove knowledge of a shared secret on both sides. How can we prove possession of something? We can put a secret key into a device and make sure the secret key cannot leave that device, and perform some calculations, the same as we perform in the challenge response scheme on the device. So we need to possess the device in order to prove our identity. Multi-factor authentication uses two of them, at least two of them. Two-factor is two, multi-factor at least two authentication methods, such as possession of a device. We will talk about one-time passwords later, time-based one-time passwords. We will discuss that in detail later. You can prove the possession of your mobile phone by simply sending a message to it, to that specific device. Then maybe the phone or the SIM card or any other method. And then I need biometry to access this device. So biometry can play a helping role in that. Maybe I have to use a fingerprint sensor on a specific hardware that proves my authenticity before it does so. Yeah, before it starts to prove my identity. It proves that I'm the person sitting in front of my device. My computer has a fingerprint sensor. My iPad here has a face recognition mechanism with a LiDAR sensor, which is not used on that camera, but the other. Why is it important to mutually authenticate communication partners? We discussed that. I used an example of an ATM. We discussed buying an ATM on eBay, placing it in the lobby of the university, asking or offering free money for no, not free, but free withdrawals of money for everybody. And then people come, insert their card, possession, enter their secret PIN, personal identification number, knowledge, and then we switch off the device and say, error, your card has been seized. We keep it, we have knowledge and possession. There was one idea to enter the wrong PIN code before you enter the real one, so that if the machine accepts the wrong one, you can be pretty sure that it's manipulated. But would do that. The ATM actually does not authenticate itself. But we are against the machine. We are authenticating. And we are giving away our shared secret. Mutual authentication is important. Otherwise, you might have a man in the middle or anybody who steals your identity. which is basically a man in the middle. The ATM plays the role of a man in the middle in this scenario. Sorry for not being gender neutral. I can also call it a person in the middle. So we get what we need. VPNs offer cost savings, obviously, by using the internet. It's much cheaper. What would be the alternative? Building dedicated end-to-end fiber optics. You cannot. You cannot get a fiber optics cable between here and New York. If you want an end-to-end, a so-called black dark fiber, you go to a telecom provider and they give you the illusion of providing an end-to-end network. When you put some light in there, some light comes out there. That's why it's called a dark fiber. It's a slang word for end-to-end network, but in reality, it's a virtual connection anyway. So you have the impression you have the physical layer in your hand at both sides. With physical layer, I'm referring to ISO-OSI layers. I assume that you all know them. We talked about application layer before, now we are talking about physical layer. I hope you know the difference. If not, you're lost anyway. I won't explain it here now. Okay. Which cryptographic methods can be used? They have to be fast. We talked about last time, another reminder, we talked about the disadvantages of using security, of applying security to processes. Security slows down the processes. Yeah, I have to enter my PIN number at the ATM. It slows me down. I want my money. Give it to me. Maybe a fingerprint would work faster. In some countries, you can use your fingerprint to withdraw some money. You have to enter your card, fingerprint, get money. Bit faster. Paying at the point of sale with your credit card, for instance. You're just placing them in front of the reader. Within a second, you're done. You're all done. You're all set. Everything, all the cryptographic magic has happened. You don't have to enter a PIN, which slows you down by 10 seconds and all the queues waiting behind you. So security is slowing things down. More security is slowing things down. We don't want that. But we have to, let's say, accept certain security measures. So VPNs have an influence on performance. Maybe they have an influence on manageability of the network. We will discuss that later. Why is a VPN making it harder for network administrators to see what's going on? Maybe you have heard about overlay underlay networks. It's a let's say more wider VPN. You have a physical network, you build your own network on top, which is the overlay network, which is actually using VPN technology to connect your devices. So several components are available and necessary to protect networks and computers. Firewalls, IDS, VPNs, DMZs are some of them. There's a human factor. We talked about social engineering already. Can you give me your PIN? No. I pay you 20 euro for the PIN. I don't want to mention the 72 versions again to fake people doing something. So okay. We need some cryptography. I'm asking for a definition of cryptography, what would you answer? Doing some magic with numbers, huh? Better than nothing. Can you explain the magic? What would be a good definition of cryptography? Anyone would give it a try?
Maybe converting the plain functions to a form that understandable for other people.
Yeah, this is confidentiality. You're doing something with numbers the attacker cannot do. Can we say so? Would that be a good definition of cryptography?
I think
Encoding is something different. Encoding and encryption is totally different. Encoding is something you do with, let's say you are encoding bits by voltages. That's encoding.
it's like
Translating one symbol into another. It's
cryptography, it's like encryption. For example,
encryption. Yeah.
symmetric cryptography.
Yeah, now you come up with an example again. That doesn't work. I mentioned this because it always, in the first semester, or maybe in the third semester, depending on what you're studying, we have an lecture called Rechnernetze-Datensicherheit, networks and data security. And there's always the question, what is the definition of, and people start with something, for example, and something like that. It's not right. And I would say 50% of those who fail because they don't know the difference between a definition and an example. So that's why I mention this so often here. I can explain it with examples later on. The definition is not always maybe not always precise, maybe not always correct. We are not in mathematics here. Different people come up with different definitions. So that's why I'm stressing that so much today. So sorry. I try to avoid that. So we recapitulate some crypto schemes, basic cryptography. We do something with, in this case, a plain text with some information. We do encryption, which is one example of cryptography. It's not only, cryptography is not only encryption, but this is an example. The attacker knows E and D. The attacker knows the algorithm. Is this true in every case? Actually, we have to assume that. Why? Because the attacker is able to look into computer programs. The attacker is able to look into hardware. The attacker knows how it works. So it's a stupid idea to hide the implementation, the algorithm from the attacker, because he might find out anyway. And it's another reason why this is a stupid idea, because you don't have a group of scientists checking your algorithm. Making the algorithm public helps others to check the algorithm and say, oh, there's an error in it. A beginner's mistake. Don't do that. For instance, the wired equivalent privacy algorithm, WEP, in the first draft or in the first release of the Wi-Fi standard, did not survive the first year of public review. There are so many mistakes in it. It's broken. And in order to tell as fast as possible how the algorithm or which errors might be, you need to publish the algorithm. I give you an example where the manufacturer in this case do not provide any information about the algorithm. Those keys, those are mechatronical keys. There's a mechanical part which works on every door. It's the same in every door, at every door in the university, at every lock. And there's an electronic part in it. There's a chip in it. Actually, microcontroller. There's a battery. And there seems to happen some cryptography between the lock and the key. And the manufacturer does not tell anybody which algorithm they use. So we have to rely on something we don't know. We can try to reverse engineer it. I can give you some example communication if you want to. I can give you even electron microscope images of the chip, but the algorithm is not published. And they, on their website, they say, yeah, the algorithm is confidential. You're not allowed to publish the algorithm if you find out. That's what they say. They actually sued some scientists for publishing part of the algorithm. They don't want the algorithm to be public. That's a bad idea in my opinion. In most people's opinion. So there's something called the Kerckhoffs assumption. Actually, the guy is French, I guess it's Kerckhoff or whatever. He was French. Security only depends on keys, not on not knowing the cryptographic function. So the attacker knows E and D. The attacker is in the middle between E and D. What is happening in the middle? Maybe some transfer of data, or maybe some storage of data. We have the plain text, we have the encryption key, we have the decryption key, and some basic mathematics behind it. Do you know any encryption that works that way? All of them. Any examples? Now I'm asking for examples. RSA, AES. There are a lot of other encryption algorithms. Some have fancy names such as Blowfish. What can you tell about the encryption key? We want to prevent a brute force attack. How do we do that? We make it long enough. By making it long enough, I'm actually meaning we have many different keys. The number of potential keys depends on the length of the key in bytes or bits or words or whatever. So length of key is a synonym for the number of different keys. How many would we need? More than an attacker can try in a given time. How long would it take to count to 2 to the power of 256? 256 bit is a typical length for a symmetric key. It would take ages. Too long for the attacker. For some school students, we have kind of a, we call it the Olympic Games in computer science for people in the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, high school students. And we ask them the following question. An information is worth 1 billion euro. Every attempt, every try of a new key costs 0.000001 cents. You can try, or actually, we made it a bit more complicated. We said an hour of computing of trying keys costs 10 euro. How long shall the key be so that it is not worth for the attacker to try all the keys? So you can consider the value of the information as a criterion to decide how long the key has to be when trying a key has a price. That's basically something that determines the length of keys. What would it cost under my assumption to try 2 to the power of 256 keys? That's 10 to the power of 79 or 78 or something. If you can try 1 billion keys per second, you have 1 billion computers at hand. So that's 10 to the power of 18. And every hour costs you 1 million euro. That's very cheap for 1 billion computers. So basically, you don't have enough currency on Earth to pay that. We don't have enough energy to compute all those keys. We don't have time anyway. Your lifespan is limited as much as mine is. So, and you don't want to wait 10 to the power of 20 years for the result. You cannot. Can you? No. What is the probability of just guessing a key? It's 1 divided by 2 to the power of 256 in this case. So that's 2 to the power of minus 256. That's almost 0. Guessing doesn't work. What's the probability of guessing a PIN code for a smartphone SIM card, which is 4 digits? If you don't have any limitations on the numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4 would work as well. 1 divided by 10,000. You have 3 attempts. 1 divided by 10,000 times 1 divided by 9,999 times 1 divided by 9,998. So almost 3 divided by 10,000. 1 of 3,000. If you are able to, for more than 3 tries, you're on a good side, you're on the lucky side. Then it takes less than a second to trust all the PIN keys, PIN codes, PIN number, pins. Yeah. Test all the identifications. So key length is important here. We talk about computational feasibility. The attacker's goal is to recover the plaintext from the ciphertext, which can, under Kerckhoffs's assumption, only be done by deducing the decryption key, or by using any, let's say, any errors in the algorithm. What could be an error in the algorithm? An error could be that only a limited number of keys is being used. How do you generate the key? Any idea? How do you generate the key for this encryption algorithm? You ask a person to generate the key, so please type 256 bits in the computer. 01111001. No, why not? Humans tend to produce bad random. So the answer to the first question is you use a random process. The computer in front of you works deterministically. We talked about that. Is it hard to generate a random number in a deterministic computer? It's pretty hard. So you're using, let's say, quantum effects, or you're using noise, using a sound card to record the sound your toilet makes while flushing. Then you are using the least significant bit of the audio samples, and that should be pretty much noise. At least something an attacker cannot predict. And that should be really 0101 in a very random fashion. Can you prove that the number is true random? Yeah, there are some tests. It's not a proof, but you can perform some tests. So for instance, the amount of zeros and the amount of ones should be almost equal. that is actually a contradiction to the following. Every of the key has the same probability to be drawn, to be generated. So the probability of having 256 zeros is the same as having 1 0 0 1 1 1 0 and so on. But a good random number generator should not generate all zeros. Then it might be broken because it does not generate any ones. So a first test would be counting the number of ones and zeros in your key, in your pin, in your encryption key, in your random number. The length of sequences of the same digit, in this case, zeros or ones, should not be too long. So if you have 10 zeros in a row, it's not impossible. What is the probability, by the way? You can calculate that. For every bit, it should be 1/2. So 1/2 to the power of 10. So the probability should be very low for that, but it can happen. And so the longest sequence of equal zeros or ones of equal digits should not be too long. This is another test. There are more than 20 tests for random number generators. You can look them up if you look for random number generator test and NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, don't know, American organization. There are different attacks on this cryptographic algorithm. Ciphertext only. What does it mean? I only have the ciphertext. The attacker usually has the ciphertext. Would there be an attack without the ciphertext? No. If you don't have the ciphertext, you cannot deduct any information. So the attacker needs at least the ciphertext. So having only the ciphertext would make it very hard for the attacker to break the system. What could he do? He could perform a brute force attack. Maybe not even that would work. Have you heard the term one-time pet? In this case, all plain texts with the same length as the ciphertext could be the text that is being encrypted, and you would, in your brute force attack, you would find all the potential plain text, and you cannot tell which one is the right. If you find 1 gigabyte of data which is encrypted with a one-time pad, you perform the brute force attack, which is impossible in terms of time, but theoretically it's possible. Yeah, it's a finite number. It's a huge number, but still a finite number. If you try all the keys, you will find all text with a length of 1 megabyte, 1 gigabyte, or how long the text was. You will even find song texts, find all the documents that have a length of 1 megabyte. And you cannot tell which one is the right one. So this is the proof why one-time pads are unconditionally secure, ultimately secure. Ciphertext only could work if you have a condition where to stop the brute force attack. How about known plain text? This is the opposite. Or maybe you have partly known plain texts. For instance, you're sending a packet through the Wi-Fi network. You know parts of it, because you know the source address, for instance, you know it's coming from that access point, and this access point is always using that same source address. So you know parts of the plaintext. That would be a good candidate for a brute force attack later on, because you know some stop criteria. Chosen plaintext, or partly chosen or partly adaptively chosen plaintext. Will that work on a Wi-Fi network? Yes, you can send an IP packet to anyone in the room. So you can decide what's in the packet, and the device will encrypt it for you. So you have the plaintext, at least parts of it, and the ciphertext. So you can guess the key. That's how the WEP, the wired equivalent privacy algorithm, has been broken. It can be broken by adding 1 byte, then by sending 2 bytes, and then by sending 3 bytes, 4, and so on. So if you send the same packet with more payload every time you send it, it takes less than a millisecond to break the algorithm. If you can choose the plaintext. So a chosen plaintext attack, is more dangerous. Adaptive chosen ciphertext. Chosen ciphertext. I don't know an example to explain that. Maybe you can find one. But if you are able to choose, actually, yeah, you can. You can, to the decryption, we can send any. Yeah, there's an example. We can, on the Wi-Fi network, we can send any packet and see what's happening. So we can try. Okay. So symmetric encryption works like follows. We have a key with a specific length. Usually the length is defined by the algorithm. 256 bits is a reasonably long key length for symmetric encryption. This key can be generated by entering a password and using the password as a seed for a pseudo-random bit stream generator. And then we are using the output to encrypt our plaintext bit by bit in a stream cipher. It could also be, instead of the pseudo-random bit stream generator, it could also be the key being read from the pre-exchange key of a one-time pad. For a one-time pad, we need 2 pre-exchange keys. Maybe we can combine this with some quantum cryptography to send bits through a quantum channel. And then we can detect the attacker. We can detect somebody reading the key. That's the way how quantum key exchange works. If you want to, there are some slides at the end talking about, I think it's WG84, which is a mechanism to use quantum cryptography to exchange keys. So anyway, we need the same key on both sides. That's the way symmetric encryption works. The same key is being used for encryption and decryption. So we have an encryption function and we have the inverse function, which is the decryption function. Plus and minus are inverse. Do you know what let's use a one-time pad. For the one-time pad, we can use XOR, exclusive OR, as the encryption mechanism. What is the inverse function to XOR?
Equal?
No. The inverse function to XOR is XOR. XOR? Oh, yeah. Was that a question or an answer? So let's use 10110101 as a plain text. And as I said, generating a random number by myself is not the best idea. By using this as the key. So this is the plain text, this is the key, and I'm using XOR of both of them to get the answer. I assume you all know the logic table behind that. See some stressed faces here. Can you answer that? XOR. So bitwise XOR. That's what I'm interested in.
Both are 1 or 0.
Yeah.
And one is 0 and one is 1.
Yeah.
It's 0.
So have I done it right? Thank you. And now we do it again. This is the key again. Sorry. This is the key again. We do it again. So now we are doing those two, form an XOR. This is the key again. 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Hey, it's the plain text. Proof by example. Proven by example. It's not a real proof, but yeah, XOR is the inverse function to itself. So we can use XOR very easily in a one-time pad for both encryption and decryption. Yeah, we don't need to encrypt all the bits. We can use blocks, maybe byte-wise. We have done this in the example. And we can reuse the same key again and again. Then we have a block cycle. And yeah, every block is encrypted and maybe counters increased. A one-time pad is a stream cipher where the key stream is a true random bit stream. It's unconditionally secure. The problem here is exchanging the key between the two parties. You need a lot of random numbers to be exchanged before you start sending messages in an encrypted manner. That would work for very important messages. You're sending a hard disk full of random numbers where you keep a copy of it. So you have two hard disks or two SSDs with the same random numbers on it. You send it to the German embassy, and then you can unconditionally securely communicate. That would not really work for a 5-hour stream meeting because you need too many random numbers to be exchanged before. It could work for 5 hours or for 10 hours, but sometimes you run out of random numbers which you have shared before. Would that be feasible for communicating with a web server somewhere in North America? No, you don't want to travel there, exchange the random numbers, and travel back, and then use the web server. It doesn't work. At least not for the variety of web servers you are using in your lifetime. So I can assure you that whenever you open a website via HTTPS, the S stands for secure, which means it's encrypted. there are some random numbers needed for that. Whenever you open a website, some new random numbers have to be generated, which is, as we learned before, quite hard for a deterministic computer. So one-time pads are not really suitable for day-to-day encryption and day-to-day cryptography. Practical ciphers use much shorter keys, 256 bits. They are used to seed a pseudo-random number generator. Pseudo-random number generator means whenever you enter the same seed, you will get the same sequence of pseudo-random numbers, of randomly looking numbers. Some of you might have experience with Unix systems, for instance, def-random and def-urandom are typically two implementations. One of them, I don't remember exactly which one, I think it's urandom, is the one that uses pseudo-random numbers. I'm not sure, are you? No? Okay, so whenever you start them with the same seed, you will get the same sequence of random numbers. Practical ciphers are not unconditionally secure, but computationally infeasible to break. Proving that a cipher is computationally secure is not easy. You can show that it needs too much time to find the right key through brute force, but the assumption could be there's a faster way than brute force. What could be a faster way than brute force? If you know some, let's say, internal rules, for instance, how keys are being generated. If you know they are not truly randomly generated, because maybe there's a 60% chance for a 1 and a 40% chance for a 0. In this case, you would start your brute force attack with some numbers first. Those that contain more ones, obviously. So you will reach, statistically, you will reach the correct key in the brute force attack earlier. How should a random number generator, or how should keys be distributed? Evenly. Every key should be present with the same probability. Yeah. For many ciphers, there's no proof that they are secure, but the assumption is nobody has found a shortcut yet, so they are considered to be secure. Yeah. If a proof exists, it usually relies on some assumptions. I give you an example of an old mechanism. It's not frequently, it's still in use, but not frequently in use anymore. DES. DES uses an initial permutation. So 64 bits are being put into that initial permutation system. What is it doing? It's simply swapping some bits, putting the first bit at position 25, the fifth bit at position 9, and whatever. So generating some confusion. Then those 64 bits are divided into two parts which have a length of 32 bits. One is pulled to the left, and the other one is pulled to the right. And then there's an F function. The F function, the round function, works as described on the right-hand side. There's an XOR for the key, which is in the red circles. And the key is somehow permutated. And then it is put into those S boxes. There are 8 of them. And the S box is a substitution box. So when a specific 6-bit long number is being entered, a 4-bit long number is being outputted, put out, generated. The S-box is a simple lookup table. Do you know the origin of the S-boxes? The inventors of DES came up with the S-boxes, gave it to the NSA. The NSA changed some of them, and yeah, they are defined. They are very well defined. You can use that. You can look them up on the internet. You can look up S6 S-box for DES. Shall we give it a try? Let's give it a try. S-box DES definition or implementation in C, in Python, whatever. Oh, this is AES. I was looking for DES. DES Pi. No, it's Pi. Can we find it somewhere here? Yeah, here they are. So it's simply a definition, a lookup table. Whatever bits get in, the results are here. 6 bits get in. How many possibilities do we have? 64, right? Yeah. So there should be 64 numbers. That's 8 by 8. That's exactly what we have here in the lookup table. That's the S-boxes. They don't seem to be secret. Maybe I didn't see the S-boxes. Yeah, but they are there. And there are 8 of them. And then there's another permutation P, which is swapping some bits, hardwired. And this is done how many times? 16 times. So the 32 bits are put into that system, and then they are computed with XOR with the result of the last round, and then they are put in again and again, and we end up with the encryption algorithm. The good thing about this so-called Feistel network is the decryption can be computed the same way. You simply have to add more rounds. I don't want to prove that, but the proof is quite easy. Look for Feistel network and encryption, decryption. It's working by performing more rounds. Yeah, that's the algorithm. Is it secure? Can you prove? Can you see any security vulnerabilities? There are some. I can't see, but people say there are some. And you can look it up. This is not the cryptography lecture because I don't have any ideas about all the computation behind that with very large numbers. So you have to study number theory first, and then you can look into that. So this is, we assume, we believe. And actually, in reality, current implementation run it 3 times. So it's called triple DES, triple DES, 3 DES, because if you do it more times, it's more confusion in it. Makes it harder. And the inverse function is a bit complicated for the attacker. A bit is yeah, not the right word here. It's highly complicated for the attacker because the attacker has to perform a lot of lookups and make a lot of tests. Brute force could work. How long is the key? I think for DS it's 64 bits, I think. No, 56 bits. Only 56 bits. That's not much. If you do it 3 times, it's 168 bits. Symmetric encryption works very fast. You can implement this in hardware. You have the result. AES can be implemented in hardware very fast. Most modern CPUs have lots of cryptographic algorithms implemented in hardware, because we don't want to slow down processes by running a Python interpreter. They have one disadvantage. You need the same key at both sides. If you are able to exchange the key in a secure manner, you are able to exchange the message in a secure manner, but you can do that in advance. That's the advantage of symmetric encryption. You can exchange the key in advance. But you need the same key at both sides. As we said, it is infeasible to travel to the US to exchange symmetric keys with all the web servers you want to communicate. There needs to be another mechanism, which is called asymmetric encryption, which is much, much slower, even if implemented in hardware. If you have studied computer science in the bachelor here in Rostock, you probably remember the RSA algorithm in the first semester. You know, there's a Euler's phi function in it. There are some rules when calculating the Euler's phi function with some prime numbers. There's some shortcuts which you can use if you know the prime numbers. If you don't know, you have to test you have to run a lot of tests. You have to calculate which algorithm is it? Not Euler, Euclid. The Euclidean algorithm quite many times, which takes a lot of time. So RSA relies on the hardness, on the infeasibility to calculate or to guess those prime numbers. They are very large. They are 4096 bits large, for instance. There are so many of them to try. For every number, you have to try whether it's a prime number, and then you have to perform the tests. Yeah. There might be a shortcut which we don't know. RSA, for instance, it's known not to be quantum proof. Post-quantum computers, so when we can test all the possibilities at once, actually the quantum computer doesn't test because we cannot, then it's insecure. RSA is totally insecure if we are able to build quantum computers with 4096 qubits. Currently, they are dealing with 8 or 9 qubits or so. So still some time but they are known not to be secure when quantum computers exist. There are some others. By the way, symmetric encryption is always considered to be secure in most cases, because the quantum computer is very bad at testing. So whenever you have a brute force attack, and the brute force attack is the fastest way, then it should be safe against quantum computers. We can discuss this later. The key here, there are 2 keys. There's the encryption key K, usually called or referenced as the public key. And there's a decryption key, usually referred to as the private key. And whatever is encrypted with the public key can be decrypted with the private key. So in which relationship should K and K prime in this example stand to each other? According to E and D, the encryption and decryption function. Actually, it's the same function. In this case, E and key are the same. Necessarily, I think they are necessarily the same. In which relationship should a public key and a private key in the RSA algorithm, the RSA encryption scheme stand to each other? They should be inverse element regarding the cryptographic function. So they should be inverse regarding RSA, actually regarding modulo by a f of something. So that phi of something, that the Euler's phi function. So we can discuss this later in the exercise again. Some, let's say, basic formula. The public key can be made public, but it needs to be ensured that the public key is authentic. Otherwise, we would have a man in the middle, person in the middle attack. In this case, it doesn't matter because the attacker can be male anyway, so it would not make a difference. Yeah, in the afternoon we are talking about hybrid encryption because this is so slow. But key exchange is very easy. It simply has to be made public, and trustworthy third party has to be present. This leaves the following open questions. Who is the trustworthy third party? How does it work to guarantee the authenticity of the public key? What is a public key infrastructure? What other parts in the infrastructure would we need? And we talk about that, not in the afternoon. We talk about the cryptography in the afternoon, but not about the public key infrastructure. We'll talk about that later. When we talk about the tasks and the responsibilities of the public key infrastructure in a scenario where we have, for instance, VPNs and want to ensure authenticity of both parties, or we want to use encryption to guarantee confidentiality. See you in the afternoon. Enjoy the lunch. See you at 1:30. Bye-bye.